So, if you finish your first draft of your book, you might start thinking about hiring an editor or at least begin the revision process so that your book is ready to publish. This is something I've talked a lot about over the past few years, but there's a lot of new tools out in 2024 that I wanted to mention as a possibility. I don't actually think it makes sense for you to pay an editor for copy editing, line editing, or proofreading. And we'll talk a little bit about developmental edits. So, this isn't going to be a total video on how to edit a book because there's so many moving parts and there's so many things you need to focus on if you want to improve your story, especially for fiction writing. But I will mention the most powerful writing techniques in regards to revising your rough draft and turning it into a really powerful manuscript. And then I'll link to some of the other resources and videos that I've made on each of these specific strategies because it's too much to cover in one video. So I'm going to dive in and show you one of the projects that I'm working on, a novel that I've got on pre-order that has to come out in about 6 weeks. So I'm behind on the entire process, but I'm going to have to do a lot of work quickly to get it ready to publish. And because I have some experience, I'm fairly confident that I know what I'm doing and I'll be able to pull it off. But if this is your first book, there are so many things to focus on. It may feel overwhelming and you're not really sure how exactly you can improve your manuscript. So stick around in this video. I'm going to give you some really powerful tools towards the end that'll save you thousands of dollars on editing and actually let you finish your book to a high enough level that readers are happy with it. Thanks. Let's dive in. Okay, so jumping in, this is what my manuscript looks like. It's terrible right now. I'm at 78,000 words. This is just a Word document. I still write in Microsoft Word. I use a 24 chapter outline, which I'll talk about in a minute. And this is barely half done, which means I've got a lot of content in the first half of this book. But you can see, like over here, this is how I do my menu. I've got anytime in Microsoft Word you use the heading 1 tag, it should show up over here on your navigation pane. And you can actually drag and drop these sections around, which a lot of people don't know. And when I've finished the chapter, then I take away the notes that I put in the chapter headings. So like 1, 2, and 3 are reasonably finished in that I have a readable first draft. It doesn't mean they're edited or they're ready to publish, but all the stuff I want is there. And I'll be going through that I have to clean up basically the first 12 chapters where I have a lot of content, but it's so rough, it's not readable. And then I have another 12 chapters that I haven't really even written yet. So this is too early to think about editing, but I wanted to use it as an example because I can't really show, clients' works or other people's books. And I'm going to talk about how to edit a book. This is what my process looks like. And we'll start here. When you're thinking about proofreading or line or copy editing or developmental edits, that's probably what you're like when you've got a first draft done and you're thinking about hiring someone, you're probably thinking about these things. And people are offering these different services. So, real quick, we'll go over what they are. Proofreading is just for typos, spelling mistakes, punctuation. Line and copy editing, people use them interchangeably, even though they are really pretty different. But it's rather than just fixing the mistakes, it's improving the stylistic choices. So repetition, redundancy, moving sentences around to make it more powerful, especially focusing on like the first and the last chapter of every scene to make sure it's a really strong hook and it gets the momentum flowing. So this involves more rewriting, but no editor is really going to rewrite your content for you or make significant stylistic changes for you. So really it's just about tweaking a word or two here or there to make it slightly better, but it's not actually going to do a great deal of work. So for proofreading and line editing or copy editing, I actually don't think you need to hire a professional editor. A lot of people pay me quite a bit of money for editing a book, and often the book needs proofreading, which means I have to spend so much time, with the punctuation, adding dialogue quotes or the right paragraph breaks. And that's pretty easy stuff that you shouldn't pay an expert a lot of money to do for you, even though it's very time consuming. So it's worth it if you want to get it off your plate. There are tools that allow you to find the typos or the mistakes pretty easily. I personally use Grammarly. Some people will use Pro Writing Aid for line and copy edits, which are a little bit more It focuses a little bit more about your writing style or common writing weaknesses or common writing mistakes. But I only need a tool that will help me to fix the typos, and I find that Grammarly is the best for that. So when you have Grammarly plugged in, the new version of Grammarly is sort of like a floating window that um, can do the stuff that it does in any application that you open, but I prefer having Grammarly up here inside of Microsoft Word. That's a special tab that you have to download. Um, but you can actually open Grammarly, go to Grammarly, and instead of choosing all issues, just choose correctness, which will only focus on the mistakes. And I believe the correctness feature is available even in the free option, so you don't even have to pay for Grammarly, but it works really well. I don't know that I've made a lot of mistakes, but for example, if I go down here and click on this, it gives me the little red underline. It'll say I don't need that comma there. I don't trust Grammarly in terms of my comma use, so sometimes I might agree, but a lot of times I'll just ignore, but it will also probably flag actual typos. Um, Tickling in my arms, squeezing him and tickling in my arms. There's something weird there. Tickling him in my arms. Grammarly probably shows the missing word, which is pretty good. So I can just click that and it's fixed the mistake. So I use Grammarly to go through for a final proofread. It works really well. I recommend you do it also. Developmental edits. I'm basically going to skip over the line to copy editing because there are some AI tools that are a little more powerful than Grammarly that are available right now that I think work pretty well for line or copy editing. And I think that you should be open to using them because if you don't have the budget to hire an editor, you can actually get more changes done with an AI tool than you could with an editor because, like I mentioned, when you pay for an editor's time, they're really not going to rewrite your book. They're not going to rewrite every sentence from scratch and make it better. They're going to tweak and fix the things that are wrong or the things that are badly written and make them passable. They'll make them okay, but they can't do the major reconstructive work that you're paying them for unless you're paying for ghostwriting. So I charge like 12 cents a word or 25 cents a word for ghostwriting if I'm rewriting your book basically from scratch, but it's so much work that most authors who don't have a book that's commercially marketable, they're not going to recoup the investment. So I don't recommend you hire a ghostwriter to rewrite the book for you. And most authors, they don't actually want that anyway. So I'm going to skip this one, talk a minute about developmental edits. This is the higher level stuff with, making the flow of the story work so that it's gripping and suspenseful and intriguing so that readers keep reading the book and enjoy it. There's a lot of things that go into developmental editing, but the interesting thing, a lot of this stuff is it's common writing mistakes or weaknesses. Most new authors do the same things. And so as a professional editor, it's really easy to keep pointing out, don't do it this way. There's a better way to do it. But rather than paying someone with decades of experience a lot of money to give you precise feedback on your book, you could just look at a list of common writing mistakes and learn how not to do those things and go through it, which is why I spent the last many years building content to help you to identify writing weaknesses and self-edit your own book. I actually have a free editing course, which I'll link to somewhere down below or at the end of this video, where I go through some of my first videos, so it's a little bit rough, but basically, you should learn how to self-edit and you should focus on fixing everything you can because even if you are paying an editor to do all of these things, there's a very good chance they are not going to hit all of this stuff that you could fix on your own. Not only because it's too much work for what they're getting paid for, but also because most editors do not know half of the stuff that I've discovered after, a PhD in literature and 20 years trying to figure this stuff out in my own writing and also working with clients. I know that sounds, kind of vain, but I have made resources that have had millions of views because there is nothing else quite like what I'm teaching out there on the internet because I've boiled it down in a way that it works for a lot of people to learn how to write better without spending decades trying to figure it out. So I'll touch on real quick some of the resources that I've built, and then I'll put all this stuff together somewhere in a post so that you could just quickly access. Like I mentioned, I have other videos that go through all this stuff in a lot more detail. Okay, so let's start from here. If you go to my site, which is Creative Indie, and you go to writing, you can go down here and find some stuff. I'll add something on this menu about editing, and then I'll put together one post just about editing your book with all the resources. I out so much stuff over the last decade that I know it can be kind of hard to find. So here's my 24 chapter plot outline, which is pretty useful for figuring out the structure. A lot of times, if you've written a rough draft or you've written a story, maybe you're a pantser and you didn't write it with a structure in mind. um, Using an outline like this can at least help you identify the pivotal scenes that generate the momentum of your story. Those can be added in later to fix your book if it's lacking momentum, but it can also really help you to finish a book if you don't know what to do in the middle or what happens next. So I do recommend it, and I think it's really useful. Um, I also have a scene checklist. Let me see if I can pause this. Just found it here on the same post. Because I have so much content, often I'll go back and revise it and put things together. So on this post with my 24 chapter outline, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, I have some other resources. And I do have some other free videos on YouTube that you can find, but this is a scene checklist. So here's a video that's about an hour long that goes through all the different things that you can do to make your individual scene better. And like I mentioned, this is not really editing. This is full hardcore revision when you're going from your rough draft into like a final polish, where you have some content, you know what kind of happens in your scene, but it's just not gripping. There's not a lot of action. There's not enough conflict. You need suspense and intrigue and a lot of things in your scene to make it interesting for readers to read. So I do recommend this other video, which is an hour long. There's a lot of content to dig into here. I also have some stuff on show don't tell, which I know you've probably heard before, but it's kind of difficult to put into words. What does that actually mean? And the easiest way to remember it is, what does this look like right now? One of the other things that I made before I made the 24 chapter plot, the 24 chapter plot outline, I made a 9-point plot dot, and I focused on making visual fiction. This is the plot dot. It's basically the same thing as the 24. It's just these are the 9 key turning points that are the most important to hit. And then the 24 chapter kind of fills in all the blanks between. But the other purpose of the plot dot is to draw out your scenes visually. And that's because if you're thinking about what does this look like, if this is in a movie, if this is on a stage, what is happening right now? It's either the protagonist thinking, sitting by himself, reflecting on his past, which is always, super boring. Or, if your main character is just doing a monologue on the stage, talking directly to the audience, breaking that fourth wall. Those are some warning signs. I know it does happen in some fiction, but that's not necessarily the best way to write gripping commercial fiction, which tends to be more action based. Even if it's not a, dramatic action thriller, you still want things to be happening all the time, especially in the first couple chapters. You don't want to start off with a lot of backstory. I should add something in backstory here because that's another huge thing a lot of writers get wrong, where the problem with backstory is that it's resolved action. The way that fiction works is that things are developing, and in the current moment or the current now, the readers and the protagonists and the characters don't know what is going to happen next, which is why there's suspense and intrigue, and that's why they keep reading to find out what happens next. If you are telling backstory and the protagonist now is reflecting on something that happened a long time ago, there is no dramatic stakes or tension, because even if the readers don't know how it was resolved, they can see that the character right now is fine and out of danger. So there is no suspense or intrigue because that episode has already been resolved. Backstory is really important to color and motivate the final decisions that the protagonist has to make to define, why is this particular challenge necessarily impossible for the main protagonist? Why is this impossible challenge, or why is this character and protagonist the right person to tackle this impossible challenge, it's because they have a fatal flaw or a fear or a character shard of glass that is directly limiting them to the conclusion of this action that they have to take. They have to do the thing that is impossible for them because of something that happened in their past that made the thing impossible for them. That's why you can make a story more dramatic by giving the character something that makes this action that they have to take especially difficult for them personally. That's a good use of backstory, but you don't actually reveal all the backstory until like midway through the final battle scene, 2/3, 3/4 into the final conflict. That's a whole other thing. I do have some videos on final conflict and resolutions, but that backstory is important to keep in mind because it is resolved conflict, and you want unresolved conflict, especially in the first few chapters, because that's what's going to get readers on board. So also on creativeindie.com/plot outline, which is my 24 chapter plot outline, down here I also have this link to the 25 self-editing tips for indie authors, 8 amateur writing mistakes. This is basically, I've collected a really big list of examples of signs of weak writing or common writing mistakes that you can learn to self-identify. So you could just look at the list and then go through your novel and identify the ways that you're doing these things, and then use my writing techniques to improve those things yourself. So those are kind of useful to go back into. And then I also have this for past revision stage, what, why, how, now, which is a whole other thing. But basically, when I'm editing my book, and again, you might be thinking that editing your book is just this part, but that means like somebody has to do all of this work. And there are very few editors who have the experience and ability um, to do these things at a price you can afford. I'm not saying that other people can't do these things, but because it's so much work to revise a rough draft, it's unlikely you'll be able to pay them what it's worth for them to do all of this work, which is why you kind of have to do it yourself, because it's almost impossible to hire someone who can actually take your manuscript and do all of these things to make it better, which is why I've put a lot of information out to help writers improve, because there are very few solutions that most writers can afford to actually resolving all of these issues. So the four-pass revision is basically when I'm writing a book, I'll focus on the what now, which is what actually happens in the story. That's what I'm doing. This is I'm still working on this particular book. If I go to, let's see, I have to find my navigation pane again, which I think is somewhere, design, layout. Anyway, I lost my navigation pane, which is over here, but um, I'm still working on this book, so I still have to do all of the work of figuring out what happens next, what needs to happen next. Part of that is through, like, I structure my books before I start, but most of that is, okay, I'm halfway through, I kind of know what I want to happen in this scene, but how do I connect the dots? How do I make, from where they are right now, how do I get them from where I want them to be in 3 chapters and make it necessary for them to get to that stage? So I'm still figuring out, putting the words down on the page, filling out the book so that I have some content. Then I'll shift into the how, which is, what does this look like? How do they get from point A to B? How does this actually play out on the stage? I'm not sure if I finished my thought earlier on show don't tell, but if you think about what does this look like on the stage, then you have to get into the showing and not the telling. So it's a difference of, showing that your characters in action are doing the things versus you as the narrator are breaking the fourth wall and just giving a lot of prose narration, narrative description, like the characters are going over here and doing those things versus, you know, the characters are doing it themselves and the author or the narrative is not an active presence. You don't want to get in between or in the way of your readers seeing what your characters are doing. You don't want to have to tell your readers what the characters are doing because they can't actually just look and see what the characters are doing. So that's why show don't tell is such good writing advice. And this is why like people kind of hate adverbs, because if you're using a lot of adverbs, like the she ran excitedly to hug her love interest or whatever, you are just telling readers the way that she did it, rather than just making it authentic and realistic by showing the character. That's a big topic. It's hard to get into it without specific examples to show the difference. But if you think about how does this look like, this is also where I'm going to be adding in description and scenery. I won't get too bogged down into the words or the scene description or like the backstory stuff, because if I don't know what is actually happening yet, the scene description doesn't matter. But once I know what is happening and I have a first draft that's pretty good, I will go back in and add description and detail to make it more engaging. Then I'll look at the why. Why does this make sense? What are the character motivations? How do I deepen the dramatic conflict and tension to make this more thrilling and suspenseful for readers? And then finally, I'll do the last pass, which is the editing, proofreading, line editing, copy editing, developmental edits. That's the last phase of my 4-step process. I do also have a big video just about this 4-step process, which I'll find somewhere and link to. I mentioned the common writing mistakes. Let me show you some other tools that I think are really useful for handling this kind of stuff without necessarily spending $2,000 or $3,000 on a developmental editor. All right, so I'm not very organized, but this is my website, and you can see up here I've got some stuff over on Toolbox. You can get into my courses, which are hosted on Teachable, and I do have a free editing course, which you should be able to find somewhere, how to self-edit a book. If you click on that, you can sign up for free. I do have some videos on there where I've covered some of the basic stuff that is the most important. And this is also where I will link to a lot of those resources that I just talked about. This is free. You can sign up for it. I also have a few books on writing that you can get. But if you really want to get into the more advanced stuff, like I do have a lot of free YouTube content that covers a lot of this already. And it is pretty important if you want to learn how to improve your craft and self edit your own manuscript and actually make it better in a way that just focusing on this stuff will not actually improve the content or the story. It'll just clean it up, which is not usually enough for most people's first manuscript. But anyway, but over here, if I go back under courses again, I also have a writing course, which is a little bit more advanced. I actually have a bundle. So there's a novel writing basics, there's navigate your nonfiction. If you get this one, the bestseller blueprint, it includes these other two. It has all of my writing advice and stuff. The problem is any one of these things, like show don't tell, I could talk for 10 hours about just that with a lot of examples. And these are not easy things to learn because it's always case specific. So in my writing course, I've tried to put everything together. I think somewhere I'll find a link so that you can get it half off, and I'll give you that as well. Compared to what other people are charging for writing courses or courses in general, I tend to charge like 70% less because I want to make sure that, this is critical information for writers, and writing is so difficult. I want to make sure that I can help as much as possible. You don't have to buy anything. There are a lot of free YouTube stuff that you can get access to without paying for it. But if you want everything in the right place and you want all the, most advanced writing tips to make sure that your book is the best book that it can be, I do have a course available that you can get. But I want to talk about some AI tools you can use for editing your book, because that really is the future, even though it is kind of a little bit about Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid. They are already putting AI tools like ChatGPT into Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid. If they don't already exist, which I think they already do inside the programs, they're coming very soon. And the thing that's pretty interesting, even though a lot of people are skeptical of using AI tools at all, Microsoft has already put AI into, I mean, you can see probably on my Windows, I've already got Copilot over here. I think I could just say, act as a proofreader and proofread this. I haven't actually tried this, so it's a good test. Proofread this. If I take the first chapter of my novel, which is here, sorry, this is kind of a mess. So if I take a little bit of this, there's a content limitation, so I can't do it all at once at the same time. But if I say proofread this and give it some content, it only allows me to do 2,000 characters, so it's not going to allow me very much. And this is in Copilot, which I don't think is even very good. But my point is that it's built into Windows. I think very soon it's already going to be built into all of the Office suite. So it's going to be built into Microsoft Word. Soon, inside of Microsoft Word, there's going to be a Copilot that I could highlight this and say, could you rewrite this in another style? It will be able to do that. So even if you don't want to, seek out some other AI tool, I'm just saying it's going to be in the software that you're already using. So here it's actually Copilot is giving me feedback on my writing sample, but not actually writing or fixing it, which is not exactly what I wanted. Let me try going over to ChatGPT. So in ChatGPT, I could go over here. It's not letting me access the bottom because this thing is in the way. I could go down here and I could say, please proofread this. Don't make any changes, just fix the typos and the punctuation. And I could give it a first chapter or so. So I just copied in, you can't do too much at one time, but I can copy in a couple pages. And this will, improve with time. Right now, we're still kind of limited, but we're going to get to the point where I could put a whole book in and fix it all at once. And so now it's going through and fixing things. The problem with ChatGPT is that it has a tendency to want to overcorrect and change the style and really fix things. And for most authors, that's not what they want. They just want, like, I want something that will proofread everything and fix all the typos and the punctuation stuff, especially like if it's very rough. And it looks like right now it's also collapsing all of my chapter breaks, which is obviously not what I want. ChatGPT is corrective, so I could just say, do it again, but keep the spaces between paragraphs. With ChatGPT, it seems like you have to kind of wrestle with it. And the other problem is it's not consistent. So you can add in some extra special code so that it will try to do the same thing every time. The problem is if you're editing a whole book and you're doing it piece by piece, it may not get the exact same thing every time, and I might have to wrestle with it the whole time, which is why it's a little bit limited, but still pretty neat that I could put in a chapter and it will just fix all the typos. So the nice thing about ChatGPT though is that you can just kind of talk to it like a co-writer. So this first time it screwed up with the paragraph break. So I just said do it again, but keep the space between paragraphs. So now it added in the paragraphs. And you can't really tell because I don't think there were a lot of typos in the original. But if my punctuation was all messed up, or I was missing dialogue tags, or I had simple punctuation or spelling mistakes, it would have just fixed them, which is really what I'm looking for. I would rather than what I don't like about Grammarly is that I would have to go through the entire manuscript looking for all the underlined words. If I open Grammarly and go to correctness, which is still, a pretty effective way to self-edit your book, is just to go through with Grammarly and click on all the red lines. And, if it's appropriate, fix it. It's just very time consuming, especially if it's like a lot of little punctuation stuff, or if you wanted to like dictate your novel and then you get it from your dictation from speech right to your text. It's going to be totally messy and you're going to have to fix all the punctuation. Running that through an API, an AI tool like ChatGPT, just to fix the basic stuff so that you have some clean content, is pretty useful. But I want to do this quickly instead of going through and clicking on every single thing. So here's an obvious misspelling. Vibrations, I spelled it totally wrong. So it would just fix the thing. And it's actually interesting. Let me see if, yeah, so I just had ChatGPT basically do that same thing I was just showing you in Microsoft Word. And without needing me to fix it, it fixed the word vibrations. It saw that it was misspelt. It knew what I was trying to say, even though I wasn't even really that close. And it fixed it for me. So I am appreciative of an AI tool like this because even though I could use Grammarly, it would take me like 10 or 12 hours just to go through my manuscript looking for typos. I'd rather run it through a tool that could fix all the typos quickly. The problem is with ChatGPT-4, like I mentioned, it's hard to get very consistent. It'll often screw up some of the formatting, like it didn't add the paragraph breaks again. So I don't think it's a perfect solution. But there are other AI tools that I do think are pretty good. I want to show you one more thing. I'll use this time a more advanced, a more robust prompt. So this time I said act as a professional editor, do a line edit and a copy edit to improve style, dialogue, dramatic tension, conflict, suspense, and intrigue. Also expand the scene description, make it like a gripping, best-selling book. I should actually say urban fantasy book because if I give it the right genre, it'll be more likely to do the right kind of work on the passage. Most people probably don't want AI to rewrite your content this much. And this is basically like a super powerful developmental edit because even a developmental editor will often leave comments on the big picture stuff you want to fix, but they won't really, rewrite every sentence to make it totally different. And you wouldn't want it to because you've written your book and you want to keep it in your style. So the problem with AI is that it might change too much. Um, and two problems. It might change too much, which is what you might not want. Um, Personally, like if I've already written my rough draft and I've done all the right things, like I've got all the right content, I'm okay with allowing AI to make it a little bit better because I would do that on my own in a really heavy developmental edit. It would just take me a long time. It would take me like a month to turn my rough draft, which is pretty crappy, into something that is better. The best writing usually comes in the very late stages of editing after I have all the content in the right places, and then I might make it a little prettier. But I actually don't really like pretty writing very much because I think it's distracting and I want to focus on the content. So I wouldn't use an AI to fix it this much, but maybe you do not identify as a writer and you just want to get out your memoir or your nonfiction book or whatever. Maybe you don't want to spend a decade developing your writing skills so that you're the best writer in the world. And you don't have to. Rather than paying $5,000 to a developmental editor to do all that work for you, you could use AI to take your rough draft and make it better. You don't have to have a really fancy, showy style. You could just tell it to write in a very simple style, whatever you want, like whatever style you are hoping to achieve. You can get AI to execute that. What I actually am looking forward to is when I can upload my previously self-edited books where I've done all of the work myself and just train AI to say, this is the style I'm going for. This is my personal style. I want you to fix my rough draft and turn it into this style. That's what I'm hoping to achieve. And I think the AI tools are getting pretty close to being able to do that effectively. I'm not going to read all of this out, but this was an example of, I put in a few of my paragraphs. I asked it to do a pretty robust developmental edit, and again, this is just taking it's taking your content and making it sound better by adding in a lot of nice description, a lot of pretty words. So this might be slightly better than what I had done originally because I'm only using my first rough draft that I haven't even done a lot of actual work on yet. The hard part is I would have to go back through this with a fine tooth comb and like sentence by sentence, like is this sentence or is this phrase better than the one that I have, and then make all of these executive decisions, which would be exhausting and probably more time consuming than just editing it myself. And it's hard, like, this is probably not my particular, like, this isn't the style that I'm going for. And if I'm having to, like, do it copy paste sentence by sentence, it's going to be very difficult to get AI, even if at one time, at least with ChatGPT, even if one time it gets a style right, it's not going to be able to do it consistently for every chapter. It's going to be a lot of work. So going back here real quick, another one I think is useful is Quillbot. Quillbot's more of just a rephraser, so it doesn't have a lot of styles. I think it's more suited for web content, blog posts, nonfiction. It doesn't have like a lot of advanced styles for fiction writing, but it can do basic proofreading and editing. So you could put in a chapter and choose a setting, and then it would just, spin the chapter, basically fix the mistakes, give you your content back. Jasper's a little bit more powerful. It's more for nonfiction and sales writing, I feel like, for like copywriting or persuasion stuff. It could work really well for a nonfiction book. It can work pretty well for fiction. I've tested that as well. So those are two paid tools. I think Quillbot probably has a free trial or option. We can actually just try it out here. I already have an account, so I would just paste in my text. I'm not sure how many words it allows, but quite a few, probably a couple thousand words. And then I can choose, what do I want it to do? And this will basically just choose other words. So this is almost just like a content respinner. Um, I could make it more creative or improve the fluency or just a standard. They used to have a just proofreader, which was like just fixing the typos or the mistakes, which is kind of what I actually want. And I don't see that option anymore. So here it just says checking grammar, and then it's kind of like Grammarly. I could just click on here, and then I could choose the recommended action if I wanted to. I prefer Grammarly for this if it's doing the same thing. And so this is what it's showing me for the standard, for the fluency. So you could kind of test these out, and it's basically just choosing other words. So I don't really see the huge advantage because it's not necessarily making it better, it's just making it different. And that'd be pretty hard for, you'd have to like agree on a case by case, phrase by phrase basis, which is also too much work. So I think this could be really useful. What I'm looking for again is something to fix it quickly, fix it like my whole book quickly, and make it a little bit better without having to do all of the time consuming work. So this one is Sudowrite, which I also think is probably the best one for writing fiction. And it has a whole feature where I could map out my detailed outline and generate content for writing a rough draft, which I think is really powerful if you're interested in writing fiction with AI. I think Sudowrite's probably the best one, but I could also copy my sample here. It looks like it's even pulled in my notes to myself from Microsoft Word, so I'm going to ignore those. And I haven't used Sudowrite for a while, but I think I would highlight the paragraph and go up here to rewrite. And then I could choose if I want it to be more descriptive, show, don't tell, more inner conflict, kind of useful stuff for fiction. I'll try this one and click go. And then it's going to give me some options. So over here, I basically have, this is what I wrote originally. This is an alternative version with more description. If I wanted, I could just insert it right away and replace this content, which is kind of cool. Here's more descriptive, another version. It gives me like 2 or 3 different versions. I could go back up and try again, more inner conflict. I feel like this would also be very time consuming. Like if I wanted to do paragraph by paragraph and choose the best thing, and then like I mentioned, probably like sentence by sentence, which one is better, that's a lot of very heavy cognitive effort that, um, you know, might be more like if you don't have the skills to rewrite your manuscript and make it better on your own because you haven't spent 10 years practicing how to write fiction, then it would make sense. Something like this could be really useful. It's a little bit easier and you'll probably learn a lot, but it's still going to take a lot of work. So the other one a lot of people are talking about is Claude, which is Anthropic. There are basically a lot of different large language models that are improving all the time. Right now, Claude's new update has made it pretty good. I don't have an account, I guess, because I don't use Claude very much, so I can't really show you how this one works. I think right now it might be one of the best options, and that's what a lot of my friends who write fiction are talking about. But I expect that GPT-5 will come out this summer, and it'll probably be better than Claude. They're all kind of leapfrogging over each other. There are a bunch of different options. Gemini came out with Google. Apple is partnering with Gemini, I believe, so they're going to update Siri so that your iPhones will have a ChatGPT 5. Not even, I don't remember if, I don't think Gemini is built off of ChatGPT 4. I can't keep straight all the different models. But the way things are going, all the big companies, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they are building large language model AI technology into all of their platforms and software so that all the things that people already do with their time are going to be faster and easier. I haven't even talked about, the art and the photography and all that stuff with AI generated images, which, I'll save for another video. But there is also a larger conversation to be had about AI in general, as philosophically, is it good for humanity or not? I have written some posts about that stuff on my website if you are interested, but it's a controversial topic, and I like to just point out, these things exist and they are available. Are they useful for authors or not? Can I see myself improving my workflows so that I can write more of my books without getting bogged down in the slow productive process? I'm a very slow writer and a slow editor. I write 3 or 4 books a year, which is, sounds like a lot, but not really enough for me to finish all of my ideas. So I am excited for the potential when I find an AI tool that will allow me to, you know, finish my books a little faster. And I feel like that would be really useful for other authors as well. But of course, it's your choice whether or not you want to use it or whether or not you believe that other authors should be using it. That's a personal preference. I also have a tool that I have been working on. This is something that I kind of built just for fun, where you can write a story in the style of these famous authors. But I've added this model over here. If you go on to refine, this is the syntax sorcery. I think you have to create an account to get some free credits, so I'll log in. But you can log in and get some free credits if you want. You can upgrade if it's useful to you. Now, it's impossible for me to compete with something like Sudowrite, which is backed by millionaires, or Gemini or ChatGPT 5, which are billion-dollar industries. This is a little tool that I built for myself, but some authors are finding it pretty useful, and the reason is because I can put in my chapter. I think it's a little bit expanded. I'm not sure how much content, up to 5,000 tokens. So actually more than some other online tools already. But I can paste in a scene and then I can choose what I want to do with it. I haven't totally tested everything. This is a cheap homemade software that I made, but you can choose a writing style based on some famous writers that might be closer to what you're going for, or not if you don't want to. I could just choose proofread if I only wanted to fix the mistakes. So here we go. I used that sample from my book that had the vibrations, and you can see over here, it's already underlining the things that are wrong, that are the mistakes. And then over here, it just fixes them. So over here, it's fixed the word vibrations because I spelled it wrong. So if you choose the proofread tab, then it should just fix the mistakes and not change any of your writing, which is what I'm really going for. Even here, like it mentioned that Danish is probably wrong because I guess Danish is, maybe they think it should be capitalized. I don't actually know if Danish should be capitalized when it's used as the pastry. But anyway, this kind of works. If I go to edit this, it should give me a little bit more robust. So now it's changing more, and you have to decide whether or not this is good or bad. It's doing some weird stuff here. There's still a few bugs, so I'm going to have to fix some things. So this time it made more significant changes. So when you do edit this, it's basically just, a little bit of a developmental edit. It's changing quite a bit of the content. It's keeping my story. It's keeping all the things that happened. It's just choosing different words, but not just different random words. It's not just changing for the sake of changing. It's changing it to try to make it better. The way this works is there's a lot of backend prompts. So rather than going into ChatGPT 4 or 5 and saying, this is what I want you to do, all the prompts are built into the backend. So you just have to click the button and it does it for you. The reason I'm kind of excited about this is I have a lot of other things. So for example, choose outline this, it should give me a quick summary of what happens in that scene. So if I wanted to make like a story Bible of what happens in my book, I could go scene by scene, and this is just what happens. It also has a limited amount of ghostwriting potential. So maybe I didn't write the scene. Maybe I put in my outline, like the story beats. This is what I want to have happen in this scene. And then I could say, ghost me, and it will write the scene for me. So the tricky part with using AI for ghostwriting is that even if it gets a style right, it isn't quite smart enough yet to get all the details right. So it won't know, who these characters are or what I want them to be doing or what their personality is or what they look like because it can't keep all the information from everywhere. Sudowrite actually does a pretty good job of that because in Sudowrite, I can start off with some notes and say, like, this is the genre, this is the writing style, this is what I want to happen in my chapter, and I have some notes. And it will keep track in like a big document of all the different pieces. So it's much more likely to get things kind of right. But I think that's the way that we are headed. Like I mentioned, we're limited by the number of output that we can use right now. I think Gemini is up to like 1 million words or something, so it could do a full novel in one pass. And I will update this tool so that it can also do that. Right now, I think we're up to like 32,000 tokens, which is like 20,000 words. I'm not sure if that's what I have implemented or not. This one says it's limited at 5,000. Uh, but my point is that like right now, ghosting doesn't quite work because even if it gives you a lot of pretty words, and this is what I found with Sudowrite, even playing around with it, I found some very pretty sentences. I found some very, very strong intros and outros. Like the first like hooks for scene description for the first part of a chapter or strong hooks for the ending of a scene, like very powerful, beautifully written sentences, which I can use those sentences in my book because they're probably better than I would have written it myself. But I can't use most of the content because it doesn't keep track of the specifics, like the style is wrong, the voice is wrong for those specific characters because the AI doesn't keep track of all that stuff. But it will in the future, in another year, I think it's going to be very easy to, for example, give it my book one and say, learn everything. Now write the book two, but use all of the personalities and descriptions and the settings from the first book. And, here are the scenes for the second book. It'll be able to do all that stuff. Whether or not you want to try ghostwriting with AI is different. I'm mostly interested in an AI tool that can edit for me. Here are some of the other things. I actually don't even remember what the oracle is for. I think it's for brainstorming what might happen next. I'm pretty sure that's what it actually is. Let's try it out. So what it'll do is it'll see my first scene. This is what happened in the scene, and it'll predict what might happen next if I wanted to continue this scene. That one didn't seem to work so well, so I'm gonna have to go back and make some changes on the prompt. One of the fun ones is feedback, please, which will just give you feedback on your scene. So if you just want some, what am I doing wrong? What can I improve? Some general feedback. I know people join like writers groups for this, but it's hard to get good feedback from people. So here's just the feedback where it's just acting as, a developmental editor basically, and it's giving me some questions about things that are not exactly clear. Maybe I don't have enough description. Um, I can mention it's giving me some things that I could inconsistencies. Uh, anyway, it's kind of you're gonna have to decide whether some of this is useful or not, but some of it might be. I could also, if I wanted to, find a famous writer like Oscar Wilde and then see what he thinks of my book. So this is basically in Oscar Wilde's voice, giving me feedback on my writing. It looks like I am having some buggy issues right now, which I will fix so that they are not a problem. Down here, these are kind of just the fun things. These are things that I think would be useful for writers, so I put them in here. This is the standard. I would probably not choose an author, and I would test these out. Standard, fluency, simple, expand, creative, descriptive, tense for like intrigue or suspense, funny for comedy, formal, academic, show don't tell specifically to try to make it more visual, add more scene description probably. Also, if you've written like a lot of first drafts, if you've written your first book, you might have done a lot of tense swapping that goes from first to from present tense to past tense, or from first person to second or third person. Maybe you weren't really sure, or it's just really easy to get um, lost when you're writing and switch back and forth. So this is a way to very quickly, maybe I have a chapter that I accidentally wrote in a different tense and I want to make sure all my chapters are in the same tense. Or I decided after I'm like halfway through my book, I don't want to write in first tense. This is going to have to be in third person, past tense, or whatever. there should be an AI tool that just allows you to do that. So I put these options in here because I think that's a valuable contribution, that people could use a tool like this to just fix things. So the reason I like the potential of this tool, like I mentioned in ChatGPT 4, you always have to kind of wrestle to get the same type of style. I believe if you choose a certain author and if you choose a certain type of the rewriting, whether it's just the proofreading or the simple edit or whatever, um, you might be able to find something that sounds a lot like your personal voice, like just what you were trying to reach or what you would have written on your own anyway, given the time and the skills, um, to take your rough draft and polish it up into something much better very quickly without going through and changing everything on a line by line or sentence by sentence basis. That's what this tool offers. I think you might like it if I can work out the bugs. Um, like I mentioned, I can't compete with the huge companies, and this is something I'm already operating at a loss basically. But I will keep developing it and upgrading it as long as there are some people that are using it. So that's basically it for editing. Like I mentioned, it's a ton of stuff. I typically can write a book in maybe 60 days, and it'll take me 90 days to edit it because from rough draft to final polish, there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of extra steps that most writers are not prepared for. And I do think, since I don't think it's fair to say that authors should not be allowed to publish unless they have an extra, it costs maybe 500 to 1,000 bucks just for proofreading, maybe some light editing, which I do not think will fix your book. It'll clean up your book by removing the mistakes. And if you're paying for really high quality developmental edits, they can point out what you need to work on or how to rebuild the whole book so that it's more commercial. And I know maybe you don't like the word commercial, but a commercial book is just one that people will read and enjoy enough to talk about it so that it sells. Commercial just means that you are creating a product that people want and that they will pay you for, even if you don't consider yourself a commercial writer. I believe that every author should attempt to keep their readers in mind. And if you don't have anything to aim for in terms of quality, it's very easy to satisfy yourself. I wrote a book. I love it. It's great. No worries. But when you put it out there, nobody wants it. Nobody buys it. You don't get any reviews. There is a reason. And these are things that you can fix if you determine to become a better writer. There are reasons why books are not successful. You may not want a successful book, and that's totally fine. But if you want to improve as a writer to the point that readers enjoy the stuff that you are writing, that's something you can learn. And I do have a lot of free material that I've tried to make this learning curve a little bit shorter, but it is a lot to learn. I will leave a link somewhere, or just go over to creativeindie.com and look for that writing tab. I'll leave something on there for editing where I'll put all of the stuff that's relevant to this video so it's easy to find on my website. I do have the free course on self-editing. I have a writing course, which is pretty valuable, and some books you can pick up. Um, but I think you might want to pay some attention to AI tools and try them out, because I think for a lot of cases, where you would normally spend 500 bucks to 1,000 bucks for a proofreader, for example, you should be using Grammarly or something that can fix the typos. I don't think that's something that you need to pay somebody else for. And although it's very difficult to get really high level developmental comments or edits, and those can be very expensive, you can learn to self identify writing weaknesses or writing flaws and mistakes. Because these are common things that everybody does wrong, that you can learn not to do, though it takes some work. And there is some opportunity. I think AI very shortly will become not better than maybe developmental editors, but if you don't have the budget to afford a $2,000 or $3,000 developmental edit, you could spend, if you use my ghostwriting tool, I think it'd be like $25 to edit your entire book. So I think there's an opportunity, maybe not as a replacement to developmental editors, but instead of, for the people that can't hire a developmental editor, or maybe you're not ready to spend money on this particular project because it's not a commercial project, you just want to fix it up as much as possible. I do think AI is going to make some things much easier. So you can check out ghostwriter.com. You can check out Sudowrite or ChatGPT or some of the other ones, Claude. I think it will take some I don't think they're perfect yet. I think it's going to take some work to figure out which is the best tool for right now that is adequately good enough for you to save thousands of dollars on editing, if that's something you choose to do, or at least on proofreading. You can look me up on bookbutchers.com. I do a little bit of developmental editing still, although I'm trying to focus on my own writing because I have a lot of unfinished series. And I am hoping, I'm building these tools because I need something to improve my own workflow. And I expect in the future there's going to be a lot of enormous changes, not only for writers, but for almost everybody, not only in creative industries, but in all industries. AI is really a societal revolution that I think people are underestimating right now. So I think it's important to pay attention anyway, just to see what the limitations are. I hear a lot of people saying like AI writing tools will never replace a real writer because it doesn't have a heart or a soul or whatever, which is a fine belief and opinion to have. There's a rational reason. If you're terrified of AI, you know, uh, ending humanity, basically, that's a valid concern to have. But that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't be paying attention because that just means you're not going to be aware of how and when you get replaced. You should have a backup plan, no matter if you plan to write for your own enjoyment or as a hobby or as a potential business. If you plan to make money with your books, you should stay informed. I do have an interview coming out next week on there's an online summit about AI writing with a bunch of different speakers who are really plugged into all the different industries. So I mentioned some of these tools that I use, but there's going to be, I think, 25 other people who are going to be talking about a lot of other writing tools that I am probably not aware of yet. So that's a good type of thing to plug into. It's a free online summit where you can listen to a bunch of people talk about a bunch of different tools and just see where we are now, where the technology is, where we might be going. That's something, even if you hate AI, that's something that's probably worth, it's worth spending a weekend seeing what's out there so that you stay informed because that's really something that can protect yourself. And just because it's more advantageous to be informed about what's going on than it is to just be um, hiding from it until it's kind of too late. It definitely will be. It's not going away. It's becoming difficult to avoid. Like I mentioned, it's in Microsoft Windows already. It's in Adobe Photoshop already. I have been surprised by when I started talking about AI like a year ago. I said that there's going to be a day pretty soon where it's in things, and a lot of people were like, no, it's illegal, there's going to be all these copyrights and lawsuits. I've been surprised by how quickly all of the big billion-dollar businesses and industries have already onboarded AI tools inside of their existing products. And the reason they have to do that is because AI is an existential threat even to their own business models. All the big companies who are making all the money right now, they are in danger of being absolutely replaced by new AI technologies. And they kind of had to either get on board very quickly or be outdated. There is a lot of dystopian conversations to be had. We have predicted this moment in dystopian fiction in the past. I wrote recently about A Brave New World, or Roald Dahl's The Great Grammatical Machine, which was like a 1965 version of, someday AI is going to be so good that authors can't compete and we're going to have to sell out our souls to feed our children. There's a lot of valid concerns that have been raised, and it's important to meet this moment now that we are actually here. So anyway, I hope some of this video helped you, whether you want to do it all on your own and have 100% human made content, or you're okay with allowing AI to do some of the really boring, pedantic work like improving spelling mistakes and typos. I hope that this video gave you some new information and tools to play around with. Leave me a comment or let me know in the comments if you have any questions about AI in general. Thanks. Bye bye.